Say welcome to the informational webinar, TABE offline computer-based TABE testing without an internet connection. Today we have Mike Johnson and Chastity Wright and myself, Olga Escamilla, and I also have Deborah Hargrove, and we're going to be right here behind the scenes helping everybody out. Turn it over to Mike Johnson. Mike, take it away.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go ahead and get my screen shared here really quick and get my PowerPoint on the screen. So you should see the PowerPoint on the screen now. And I'll give it a second to refresh for everybody. And so welcome everybody, and thank you for allowing us to do this informational webinar. My name is Mike Johnson, as Olga said, with DRC, and with me today is Chastity Wright. Chastity is our local Texas evaluation consultant for TABE. So she is local for any TABE needs that you need her for. She's always happy to come out, and I'm sure she'll put her information in the chat so you have her number and her email if you need to reach her at any time. We'll go ahead and get started with the overview of TABE offline. And before we get too far into offline, I just always want to refresh everybody on where you can find more information about TABE in general. And it's always on our public website, which is tabetest.com. I'm not going to go too far into that today. I might jump out there a little bit later, but on the website, and then the little computer monitor on the screen, you can see that there's a drop-down menu in the middle of the screen. That's where the resources are. All the resources for TABE 11 and 12, also for TABE Class E, the ESL version for TABE, are all posted on tabetest.com. You can look at the blueprints. You can pull down and print off the PDF practice test. You can also look at sample reports and get any updates. We'll talk a little bit later about our high school equivalency concordance. That information is posted under the resource tab as well. So you have a wealth of information always at tabetest.com. Jumping into TABE offline. Offline is a new platform for TABE, but we're still talking about TABE 11 and 12. So nothing with the content changes, just the platform that you can deliver TABE in. And TABE offline is very similar to the programs that might be using the GED kind of in an offline or correctional setting, where you can take a laptop in and out of a non-connected area. That's what TABE offline is at a base foundation. It allows you to use the locator offline. It allows you to test students offline. The only reason you would have to be connected to the internet as a proctor or administrator is to transmit the scores over to our scoring portal. We started TABE offline back in February in a pilot with Texas Corrections with the Windham School District. So they've been rolling out TABE offline mainly in the central part of the state right now. And I think as September and October roll forward, they'll be widening that rollout into more regions across the state to all 96 sites eventually, hopefully by the end of the year, I think is their goal. TABE offline also utilizes our online portal. So I will just say that our portal, the TABE portal is where you would go to access TABE online, but it's also the same portal that you would go to access scores and access the scanning utilities. So if you are a current paper and pencil user of TABE, you typically would be scanning your answer sheets into our portal. And so offline utilizes that same area of our portal as well for reporting. Looking at it on a graphical sense, the left-hand side is the online area of TABE offline, but really you only need to be online to add a new employee. So if you wanted to add a new staff person to your organization, that's done through the online portal. And if you need to transmit scores, then that is done while you're connected. Everything else is on the right-hand side can be done in a non-connected or offline mode, typically with a laptop being connected to a local network within a non-internet area. So if we're thinking about a rural school, this might be a classroom that typically might have a hotspot for some limited internet connectivity, but it does have a local network for the classroom computers or the testing computers, and you certainly can use TABE offline for that. If we're thinking about a correctional program, this would be inside the secure facility where the internet might not be accessible to the inmates, and you can use a TABE offline in that environment as well. TABE offline looks very similar to TABE online. If you're familiar with TABE online, you do log into the portal with a username and password. The one difference that you'll notice in the middle of the screen is that there is a box for offline access. So I'll show that when we get into the live environment. I'll do a quick demonstration of the offline platform, and we can see that online or offline access button in a larger screen. As I mentioned earlier, one of the two reasons that you would be connected to the internet is to add new staff people. And over on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a blue button that says Create Admin User. Typically, when you start with TABE offline, our support team would set up one user as the main user, and that person can add additional users if needed. So you do that while you're connected to the internet into your online portal area. When you do create a new administrative user, you do so with their first name, their last name, username, which is typically the first part of their email, and then their password for them to access into the system. So very straightforward to add a new staff person into the system. One other area when you're online, and you'll notice this across the top of the computer screen, that's the image of the computer screen, you'll notice that assessment management is highlighted. And this is an area to update the testing files. So you'll notice under the status column that all the assessments, TABE 11, TABE 12, levels EM, DNA, are all listed up to date. Typically, they don't get updated too often. We're not changing TABE 11 and 12, but there might be some updates to the system every once in a while, and you'll notice the status might change to say update needed. You do that in an online environment. You would download the new testing files to that laptop that is considered the TABE offline administrative machine. And as I mentioned, when you go into an area that does not have internet connectivity, you would log in with the offline button clicked on the check mark yes, so that you'll have offline access into the system. When you're in the offline environment, you can go ahead and create new test tickets, which is registering students or candidates for a test. Very straightforward to create a test ticket. Once you click on that create a test ticket button, it will bring up a window for you to enter the candidate's first name, last name, and their ID number. And then at the very bottom, a drop-down menu on what assessments you want to select for that student. So as I see here, I've highlighted the drop-down menu. I'm going to go ahead and select the locator for this student in this scenario. I could go ahead and select level D if I choose to, or level E, but in this scenario, I'm selecting the locator first. And now the completed screen shows that Marcus Rip with an ID number of USA 1977 is going to be taken, in this case, TABE 11A, and that's the assessment that's been assigned to that student. At any point going forward, because now we have Marcus created as a record in our system, we can go ahead and add new assessments to his offline access. So we'll spend a lot of time today talking about the action button on the far right-hand side of the screen. And you'll see here next to the orange arrow, I can add new assessments. So I may have added the reading assessment, but I can go ahead and add the math assessment. Or I may have started out with the locator, and I can go ahead and add the reading and math after the locator is done. We'll see that a little bit more in the live environment as well. But when I go ahead to click and add assessment, so here I can go ahead and click another assessment. You'll notice it's a little hard to see in the small screen, but the third one down, which is TABE 11E, is not highlighted or not clickable because this student has already been assigned that test. So again, I can go ahead and assign additional assessments to this candidate and not have to duplicate something that was previously done. There might be a case down the line where a student might take that same test over again, maybe in 3 to 6 months, they might take it again, and you can certainly re-register that person for this test again. Once you have a group of students registered, the status column will become very important to monitor. Within the status column, you have 3 main areas. We have students that will be completed, that's the top orange box. We have students that are in progress, that's in the middle box. and then students that have not started their assessment, and that's the bottom orange box. Each of these students kind of has their own action items to the far right. So again, there's an action column. I can click on the 3 little circles and it will expand the menu. For somebody that has been already taken their test, I can certainly add more tests to their by adding assessments. If I want to, I can actually see their responses by show responses. If I need to, I can unsubmit their test. And if I also needed to, I can update their demographics on their record. In the person that's in progress, I can still see their responses in real time if I need to. I can also add more assessments to them, and I could end their test. So maybe a student got up and walked away in the middle of a test. I can come in and end that test for that student, even though they've walked away. And then somebody that hasn't started, I can take away or delete or remove that assessment that's been assigned to them if I choose to do that. Maybe somebody missed an appointment and they told you that they're never coming back. You can go ahead and remove that from the list if you need to. One of the other areas that you'll have under the action area is to instantly score the locator test. And so again, I've expanded. A student has taken a locator. The first 2 students on the list have taken the locator. If I click on the action icon, you'll notice at the very bottom, it says instant score assessment. That will allow me to instantly score the locator in an offline environment. I don't have to connect back to the online system and transmit that score. I can instantly score it. When I do click that menu item, it will pop up the scores for the locator. So in this specific case, Marcus Rip was the student. He took the reading, the math, and the language locator, and you have your scores there and the recommended levels of M, D, and M for language. So I can jot that down. I can go back into the menu and assign Marcus now level M for a reading test, level D for a math test, and level M for language. Still in an offline environment. I don't have to get connected to the internet. So if I'm in a correctional setting, I can stay in that secure area. If I'm in a more rural area that has less bandwidth, I can stay in that offline environment and add new assessments to the candidate record. If you have a lot of students, you can also upload them through a spreadsheet. So we have an import test ticket option here. So you can go ahead and upload a group of students, and it's just doing the same process through a spreadsheet option instead of filling in the blanks on the form. That's the main area of the administrative side. Switching over on the day of testing, a student that's going to be testing would then sit down at a computer that has the DRC offline testing icon installed. And I'm going to minimize everything on my screen here real quick if I can. And over here, I have, and I'll move out to the way out to the right-hand side, I have the offline digital testing icon added. So it looks very similar to our TABE online icon, but there is one for offline and one for online. And a student would click on this icon to begin their test. So prior to the day of testing, local staff, IT staff would have added this icon to all testing computers that are on a network. And then the students can go ahead and sit down at that computer and click on that icon, and it will bring up their login screen to put in their first name, their last name, and their participant ID number. So they do have an ID number, whether it's some number that's been assigned to them. If we're not in a correctional setting and we're using an assigned number, public programs might use the last 4 of a phone number or the first part of an address. Some people use the last 4 of a social security number. Anything that's unique for that student as an identifier would work in that area. So again, in this case, I've registered for a test. I put my name in the first name, my name in the last name, the ID number that was assigned to me, and then I click on the drop-down menu for the assessment tab, and it shows that I've been assigned TABE 11E for math and 11E for language. In this moment, I can decide what test to take. So if you would like to make sure the students take the math test specifically, you could only add the math test. And then maybe in the middle, when they're taking the math test, you can go back into your menu and add the language test. So you can give the student as much control or as little as control as you need to for what test they are going to see and what test they can click on to start at any one point. When they go into the test itself, the TABE offline is actually a digital version of our paper test booklet. So they see the paper test booklet on the left-hand side in a digital format, and on the right-hand side is an active answer sheet that they would go ahead and click their answers into the answer sheet. So there are scroll bars in between the answer sheet and the test booklet, and there's also a scroll bar on the far right-hand side to move the answer sheet down along that list. At any point, you as an administrator in the offline environment can monitor the students, so seeing how far along they are on the test. Here, again, at the very top, they've taken all 5 questions of the practice test, and I can see their responses to each of those 5 questions. Down below, we can see that they are yet to start the reading test and also have yet to start the math practice test on this menu specifically. When testing is done, you as an administrator, as a test proctor, would take your laptop from that non-connected environment and go back to an administrative area that you have an internet connection and log in to the system, into the portal. This time we would not click the offline button. We would log in with our credentials to the online portal. And I can go ahead, and once I do that, I can then transmit my responses for scoring. So you'll notice on the left-hand side, I have several boxes selected. If I follow those boxes to the right, they all correspond to students that have completed their test. So when I click the box of all the completed students, then I can click up in the top right-hand corner to transmit their responses. This transmit response button is doing the same functionality as a local program scanning their paper answer sheet. So right now, in a virtual world, I'm scanning those responses over to the DRC system to be scored and reported. It's the same as at the end of a TABE online test, when the student says that they have completed, that transmits all their responses over for scoring. So it's the final step after the test is completed. We transmit the responses over to our scoring system to be scored and reported into the PDF report.
Mike?
So just, yep, yes.
Oh, sorry, Olga, I forgot you're the host.
Yes, ma'am. We're going to wait for Chastity to address the questions.
Sorry.
It's okay. We do have 2 questions, Mike, if this would be a good time.
Sure, yeah, we can go ahead, yep.
Marlena is asking, so 6 test tickets are needed to complete TABE 11. Is that correct? I'm not really sure what she's.
So let me go back and I'll show that here quick in the PowerPoint. It's not necessarily 6 test tickets, and I would think it's maybe 4 at the most. You'd have the locator and a reading and a math and a language, so that would be 4. The student would be listed on the screen several times, but you've only created 1 ticket. After you create that initial ticket, I go ahead and let me get to that spot where I wanted to. I add more assessments to that individual's record. So right now on the screen, Marcus Ripp is our student. He has a test that was created, and I'll back it up here a little bit. He was, I think it was 11A that we were adding on the first screen. After I added 1 test, I can go ahead and add another test to his record. Ultimately, on the menu, it will list Marcus a couple of times with how many tests that because he'll complete the math and maybe not complete the reading. So I could transmit the math for scoring if I need to. But we're not creating multiple tickets. We're just adding assessments to an individual's record.
Okay, and then she writes, okay, thanks. So I think you answered her question. Oscar is asking, can the assigned ID number be updated to a Teams participant ID at a later date?
I think that if you update it after, and we'll try that here in the live environment in a second. I don't know if it will let us update it, but if we update it, I think it will only update it going forward, not for past tests. Just very similar to, you know, if you took a paper and pencil test and you scan the answer sheet, you scanned what was on that answer sheet at that time. Now, if you scan another answer sheet that has another ID number, you know, if that's Mike Johnson with ID number 4900, and now Mike Johnson ends up being T4900 for teams or something, that's two different students technically. So we'll try to see what it does here in the live environment, but and then I can also check with our support team and follow up on that.
Okay, and that's the only two questions we have right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
So just to look at the graphical side of things again, we have on the left-hand side, you sign up candidates, and this is a correctional setting as an example. So you can register the candidates or the residents for testing. They take a locator, you still stay offline, you score the locator instantly, you add their full TABE 11 and 12 tests to the record based on the locator results, and then you get connected to the portal and transmit their scores and stay in the online portal to pull up their reports after they're done testing. So again, you can do this all in one day, and that's not an issue. You can do this in several days if you wanted to. You could wait to transmit the scores, or let's say you're doing reading today. So this last box on the top line, the far right-hand side, could be the reading test. Tomorrow, we might do the math test, and then the next day, take the language test. I can transmit the scores after each test, or I could wait to transmit them all at once. It's up to you on how you want to transmit that and get the scores back. So let me switch over to our system here real quick. And I'm going to log out so I can log back in for you. So I'm just going to log into the system. I'm not going to go offline because I'm online for the PowerPoint. It's the same functionality as it would be on or offline, except I have the transmit button that will be active for me. So I'll go ahead and log in. And as soon as I log in, I'm taken to my menu. Up at the very top line, it says ticket and response management. So I see all my test tickets. I can sort any of the columns. I have a lot of people with the same last name, so maybe I want to sort them with their first name. And these happen to be everybody in my family that I can think of or that I like. So I have my brother, my son, my daughter, myself, and I can sort through there. But you'll notice, and I'll highlight Keely here in the three boxes. She's listed, she's the same student, but she's listed for the three different tests: reading, math, and language. So under each of those, I can go ahead, and if I use the action item, I could even, maybe I'll remove the language from her list. What this is telling me, and I can log into Keely, I'll write down her ID so I can remember that, is that when Keely logs in, she will see the option to take any of those three tests. Some programs want to be very specific to say, I only want you to see the math test and to start the math test. I don't want you to get confused by seeing a reading, a math, and a language, and I'm telling you to take just the math test. So if that's the case, I maybe just register Keely for the math test, and then later I can come back and add an assessment and add the reading to her record. So you'll see that in a couple of scenarios. I think in most cases, let me expand this out a little bit. You'll notice that Tom over here on the side, he's taken several tests. So he has a lot of different records. Some of them have been transmitted. Some of them have been instantly scored for the locator. Others have not been started. So you'll be able to see all that information in that environment. If we need to go ahead and create a new ticket, I'll do that up at the top of the screen. I can go ahead and I'll put, I'm the youngest of 5, so I never run out of names. But I'll put my sister in here, and I have to give her a number. And so again, I put a number in here, and I can go down to the bottom. I have to put her date of birth in, and I'll pretend that. And then at the last drop-down menu, we have all the tests that I can select from. So again, at the very top is the locator. And if I do that, I can instantly score the locator, or I can go right ahead and assign her just that math test. So I'm going to go do 11M math and hit create. And now if I look alphabetically, Lynn is listed over here with the math test that I just created, and she has not started. Let me go ahead and go in there and edit the test ticket, see what I can update. And I'm just going to put a T there. Let's see if it updates that. And then let me update that one because she hasn't started. I'm going to go in here to Chris at the very top of the screen and see if I can update his ID number. And it's only going to let me update the demographics that we really don't track, all the ethnicity and labor status one. So I don't have the option after I have a test complete to update the name or the date of birth or their ID number. So, and I'll double check that again with our support team, but it looks like once a student has started a test, and I have one in progress, let me see what it does for in progress. And again, for in progress, I can only update the secondary demographic information, not the main demographic information. So I have a bunch of students registered. I have some of them listed as completed. I have some of them listed as not started. Chris at the very top is listed as completed. And I can go ahead and look at his responses if I need to. And I can see that on the practice test, he did 1 out of 7. If I expanded that, he answered the first question and then he moved on from the practice test. For reading, he only did the first 2 questions and then he stopped after that for some reason. So I can see his progress. He is marked as completed, so he ended his test from that standpoint. I'll go ahead and take a test real quick here, and I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to open up my offline testing window. Actually, I don't want that one. That was the same one we had. So let me go back, and I have it hidden down here. So I'm going to take my testing log, and that's the one I wanted. So we have, this is the student now, and her number was 5900. And when I enter her number in, now I have all the tests that were assigned for her to take. One thing that I'll point out is if I put an extra 0 on there, so 59000, it tells me right away there's no matching people for that with that ID number. Or if I put, as some people like to do, put an extra E in Keeley, that drives my wife crazy, but we can put that there. And now, again, there's still no matching record for that person, even though the ID number is right, the last name is right, the first name is not finding any records until I delete that out there. So I can go ahead and select the math test, and I can go ahead and open the math test up. It does ask me to verify anything. If now, again, I'm the student, the proctor filled in the date of birth and the gender, so I can go ahead and begin my test and confirm that the details are correct. And I start with the practice test. So I can go ahead and expand my answer sheet. We see that it says, look at the expression 10 plus x over 2. And it says evaluate the expression for 4. So I can type in an answer there of maybe 16, or I think it's actually 12, isn't it? Or maybe it's 16 real quick. And I can go ahead and put my other answer in here. If I scroll down to question 2, it says which pair of numbers has the greatest common factor of 32? And I'll just go ahead and say B. Question 3 is the price of apples at 3 different stores are shown below. Now, which of these is a true statement? And C is most likely the answer, so I'll go ahead and put that down. But I can keep scrolling through, or if I choose to, I can go ahead and just minimize my practice test and scroll down to the start of the official math test. At the end, it's, again, a digital version of the test booklet. So now we're at part 1 of the test, and we have the answer sheet for part 1. A couple of things that you'll notice under tools, we do provide a protractor right now. We are working on adding a calculator, but if a calculator is needed, it would be a handheld calculator, just like the paper test would use. And we are also working to add a timer to this section. Right now, time is kept locally, just like it would be with the paper test. But we do have the protractor, as I mentioned, so we can go ahead and use that protractor if we have to for different areas within the test if it comes up for that purpose. So again, I can go ahead and answer a few of these questions. I'm not looking at the questions themselves, but I'll just mark a few answers. I'm going to move down. I'll move the questions down to keep up with myself here. So we're down to question 17 and 18. So again, 18 starts to use the protractor. So maybe I bring that protractor back out if I need to, or I can hide it if I need to. But I'll make a couple of answers.
And Mike, while you're answering the questions, we did have another quick question about, let me read it here. Can a test be paused after beginning? And then also, will it log them out after a certain period of time?
It doesn't log them out right now. You can go in and exit them. So if they get up and leave the test, it's not, there's no timer built into the system. If I do click on this pause button at the top, it does save my answers and logs me out to log back in later. So I can go say yes to that. And if I go ahead and now type back in my name, and this time I look at the assessment, I was taking the math assessment, I can go ahead there and resume my test at the bottom of the screen. And so it kept track that I answered 3 of the practice items, and I answered so far 13 of the 34 part 1 math items. Now, maybe this is as far as I'm going to go, and I can go ahead and hit end test this time. And now it tells me that you're about to submit the test. Once the test is submitted, you can't view or modify your answers. So that's the difference between the pause and the end test. Now, pause does not mean take a break and run to the bathroom or take a break and go have lunch. Just as in the paper testing world, you're typically not stopping in the middle of the test unless there's some sort of emergency. So it is a function that's in here, but it is not something to be exploited by saying, let's take a break and in the middle of a test. You're typically taking your breaks in between tests. So in between reading and math or in between math and language, that's where a break would typically happen, not in the middle of a math test. So I'll go ahead and confirm that I'm exiting out of this test. And just to show you again, I'm going to stick with Keely here and put her name back in here. And this time, my drop-down menu only has reading and language left. I took the math test, I submitted the math test, and so now I'm only back to reading and math as my option for this. I'm going to go back over to our online or our offline portal, and I'm going to refresh this because I've been away from it for a little while. So let me do that. And now at the bottom for Keely, I'll expand this a little bit so we have all of Keely's on one page. So we can see that the 3 records for Keely, 2 have not started and 1 is completed. So I can go ahead and click on that completed one if I choose to. And then at the top of the screen, I could transfer the responses. And it's telling me that I'm going to be sending one of those over for scoring. And I'll say yes. Now, I also could have transmitted the very top record. Chris is listed as completed, but I just did 1. So now I have transmitted as the status for that 1 test of Keely. In about 15 or 20 minutes, I can go to the portal, pull up the PDF report, and have all the information for that math test on the scores for that student. After we're done testing the reporting side of things, and I'm going to go back to our public website, tabetest.com, and pull up a sample of the report, just because Keely won't be done yet. For the scoring happens fairly quickly. It's the populating of this PDF report that takes a little bit of time. So I'll just pull up a sample for that. But it's the same report that we would get from TABE Online or the same report from TABE scanning if you scan an answer sheet. You have the student's information at the top, where they tested. In the middle, you have what sections of the test they took and what date they tested on, what level they tested, and how many points they obtained on the test. And then out to the far right, what were their scores? What was their NRS level for reporting into teams? And did that NRS level indicate a measurable skills gain? One word of caution from that measurable skills gain column is that it only looks back to the previous July 1st. So this student tested on October 25th. It's looking for measurable skills gain since July 1st. So by saying yes, it means somewhere between July and October, the student tested and was a level 3, and now they're a 4. So that is a gain for that area. So again, I know the state policies sometimes are a little bit more flexible. They may allow June or May dates to carry over into the new program year, but we had to program the system with one specific date, so we stuck to July 1st, the start of the program year. At the bottom, you have the same information that you would for any of the TABE tests, how they did on each of the domain areas within reading, math, and language, and then how many points were applicable to those areas. We can see in those reading areas, we have craft and structure and integration of knowledge and ideas are where the main 2-point questions are, because key ideas and details was 18 questions with 18 points. So as a teacher, I can start to break down how I did on each of these areas of the test. The last couple of pages will show my strengths or my demonstrated skills and my areas of next focus or my weaknesses within each of those subdomains. So within key ideas and details, Here are my strengths, here are my weaknesses. Another word of caution, when I see that word proficiency, that means I did very well on the test. And I'll go back up to that report. I got all but 1 point on key ideas and details at level M. Remember, I took level M. So I still have some areas to work on because I have content from level D and level A. So my areas of next focus are skills that are covered on level D. If you see the word proficiency, typically you might think I don't have any weaknesses because I did very well on the test. But what we do is project up to the next level of TABE. If I go down a little further to the areas that I was partially proficient, now these areas of next focus are specifically related to what I got wrong on the test at level M. So I can try to improve my level M performance by working on these areas of next focus. All these skills that are listed on this PDF report are in the process of being added to the data extract file that you can pull out in Excel. So that might not be that applicable to local programs on a day-to-day basis, but what it is going to help us do is to share data with some of the companies like Aztec or Essential Ed or New Readers Press that have online platforms, and they want to import your TABE performance from your students. So by putting this in the Excel file report, it is more shareable in the future. So that's scheduled to be done by the end of this month. So we'll have an updated extract file from TABE for that. I'm going to minimize this and go back to our PowerPoint real quick. And we ran through the report, so I'll jump ahead here and talk about high school equivalency. If you haven't seen it on our public website, we do have a concordance study for high school equivalency to all 3 tests. And I know in Texas, the GED is the main test. So if we look at what that concordance is reporting, it's saying that a student that gets a 536 on level M or above of reading has a strong likelihood of passing the high school equivalency test at the minimum threshold. Strong likelihood is a very psychometric term, so some people that haven't had a lot of statistics might not understand that, but it is just meaning that you have a strong likelihood of passing at the minimum threshold. So if I go out to our website and pull up the official report real quick, I'm going to go to tabetest.com under the resource tab, and I'm going to go down to TABE to HSE concordance. This will pull up the full report. And when I do that, I can see the footnotes will tell me minimum passing 145 on the GED. If I want to get to that second level on the GED, it's 165, and that highest level is the 175. So if I get a 165, yes, I pass the high school equivalency requirements, but it is equivalent to getting C's and D's in high school. Am I prepared for post-secondary work? Am I prepared for a career that would provide a sustainable wage? Typically not, and so that's why all the high school equivalency tests have that second level cut score. And so we can see in the GED's case, it's a 627 on level D or above. And what this represents is, again, what the Department of Education was trying to do with the increase in rigor for the college and career readiness standards. So getting a 536 on level M of TABE, maybe not as challenging, but I have met the minimum to pass a high school equivalency test. But what the Department of Education did with the college and career readiness standards was try to develop them so that when a student left adult education, they were ready to succeed on their next step, whether it was post-secondary, into the workforce, into a career tech program. If I'm going into a post-secondary and I get a 165 on the GED, I'm sorry, 145, there's a pretty good chance I'll take a placement test at that post-secondary school, maybe an AccuPlacer test, and get placed into a remedial or dev ed class that does cost money for college credit. So if my financial aid is used, but I don't get any credit towards graduation. And that's what the Department of Ed was trying to avoid. If that student would have stayed in adult education a little longer, got their TABE scores up into the 627 range, they would have likely passed at that higher level score and been better prepared for the entry requirements of that post-secondary or into that workforce program. A lot of people used to always have asked, why is TABE seem to be more rigorous than the requirements of the GED? And it's really not. It's just what tier are you looking at? Are you looking at the minimum requirements, the college ready requirements, or the college ready with the credit requirements for that? I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I'm going to leave a couple of things on the screen. One is my information. I certainly will share this presentation with the TCAL folks, and it's being recorded, so you'll have that information. If you have any questions about TABE technically, whether it's TABE online, offline, scanning, you can always contact our support team, and they can always help you out. And then if you have any general questions, our customer service information is there. But a better resource is obviously Chastity. They're based in Texas for you to have as a local resource.
And I did enter my email address and phone number at the beginning of the webinar as well. We do have one question, Mike, that I'm unsure of. So I just want to double check with you as far as it's from Tiffany Johnson. Are we able to use our existing license for online or offline, or does there need to be a different type of purchase?
It's technically the same, but our support team would allocate some towards each of the platforms. So
Okay.
the TABE offline and TABE online are the same cost, and they use the same type of tokens, the virtual tokens, but they have two different buckets in our system. So they want to make sure that they can keep track of the usage from both of them. So they will allocate some over to the offline counting system for that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Okay, wait. So when are these available? They're available now.
Yeah, TABE offline is available for anybody to use. And so you can certainly use that now. I will caution you, when you think about TABE offline, it is different than online, where online, everybody gets a username and password and you kind of go into your own account, or you go into the main account with your username and password. With offline, I logged into, and I'm going to try to go back out there real quick. I logged into my offline access, and it's because it's related to my laptop. So if I get to the right section here, yeah. So if Chastity is another staff person in our organization, she could have offline installed on her laptop as well. But I have Chris Johnson registered on my laptop. If Chris happens to be on, testing on a day that Chastity is there, Chastity would have to register him. So, remember that the offline component, I can add students when I'm offline. That means everybody else's laptop that might be using TABE offline would not see these students. They'll see the scores when you transmit them, because that goes into your shared folder or shared account. But it just requires a little bit of organization in remembering that offline is truly not connected from the standpoint of registering students. So Chris Johnson might be on my laptop, might be on Chastity's laptop, and it could be on Tiffany's laptop too. Now, we might not know that until we try to upload scores, but in TABE Online, we freely and broadly give out credentials for people to access the portal. We can do that in TABE Offline. Everybody can still have access to the portal, but who is the person that is going to be the main tester that would go into these non-connected environments, whether it is a correctional facility, whether it's a rural setting, whether it's a satellite campus, something, that it's not going to be everybody on your staff that is doing the testing. And I think a better way of saying that is, in the paper and pencil world, who was the person that had to lug the test booklets around to go do the testing? That person will now take a laptop around instead of carrying all those test booklets around. But not everybody helped carry all the test booklets and had access to them while they were being used. So just kind of an organization process to think about when you are setting up offline. If you have the ability to do online, that is certainly being more connected. I think keeps everything easier and organized. But if you have needs for remote testing or rural testing or correctional settings, TABE Offline is a great solution for that. knowing that you have identified a proctor that will be responsible for the offline testing.
We do have 2 additional questions that have come in. Do we need our IT department to install it?
Yeah, so in our portal, and if I go back to the TABE, I think it's posted there. Let me double check. On our TABE portal, let me log into there real quick. And I go into our general information. I think they've posted it there. If not, we can make sure it gets posted. Under the documents, TABE Offline Digital Users Guide. So if you sort by date, or you can sort by alphabetically, but if I open up this user guide and I'll scroll down a little bit, this is what you would typically give your IT department. First, there's a requirements for the technical specs. And if I scroll down a little bit further, right here is the offline digital installer. This is the piece that they can click on. It downloads a file. They can save this file. And that's what adds that icon to any computer in the network. If I get out of this and get back to where we were on my desktop, that installs this icon on the desktop. As long as your computers on your network have this icon, then students can go ahead and test when there's a laptop connected to that network. So that's the only real technical piece is that your IT staff would have to install this offline digital icon on any testing computer that's on the network within your non-internet environment.
And then the final question is, are the scores transmitted by a network, or can you utilize a USB cord?
They are Yeah, it's done through the internet. So
yeah.
When I hit transmit, I'm connected to the internet. So if I'm back in my platform, let me get the right one open. So if I'm in this completed one, if I highlight this, I can only transfer the responses if I'm connected to the internet. By hitting transfer, it's the same thing as scanning an answer sheet, which you're connected to the internet for that. So this is I either have to be connected to add new staff, and I have to be connected to the internet to transfer responses. So that's why it's typically done with a laptop. You're taking that laptop from an internet world to a non-internet network when you're delivering the test, and then back to the internet world to upload the scores, upload the responses. They're not scores until they get to us and they get scored.
Okay, and that was the last question we had in the chat.
Okay, and certainly if you have any other questions, let Chastity know. We're more than happy to set up another webinar with you individually and go through it if you need to. But we want to certainly thank you for being with us today and appreciate everybody's time and interest in TABE Offline.
Thank you so much, Mike and Chastity.